Hey everyone, we have Jenya from Re7 Capital doing a talk on liquidity as a service, musings as a DeFi power user. And I'll let him take it from here.
Thank you, and hi everyone. It's an exciting time to be a yield farmer and a liquidity provider in the space. And initially, I assumed that this talk would be about exciting opportunities and how to enjoy that. But instead, I thought it makes sense to restructure that and talk about risk management. So Re7 is a DeFi native investment firm. We are liquidity providers in the space. So our job is basically to use every single legitimate DeFi project out there, provide liquidity, and give our investors some yield on their stable coins and other assets that they give us. So it's been an exciting few years of doing that, and as you can imagine, the space has matured quite a lot. We've seen some things get completely wrecked over the last few weeks. CeFi, DeFi. DeFi has so far performed much more strongly from the kind of robustness perspective. But nonetheless, I thought it would be interesting to share how we approach risk, how we track data and other metrics that are vital for anyone who is doing something in the space professionally as a financier. And with that, let me walk you through that. Right. So what we've seen happen lately have been massive blow-ups of different curve liquidity pools. So ETH, which you see in the screen in front of you, is the latest one. But prior to that, we've seen MEME, we've seen USDN, we've seen Terra, obviously, and many others. And it became very vital to basically run proprietary infrastructure to track these early deviations in the curve pools. So Parsec, which is a great provider in the space, supplies some of these tools to track this data. We had to build some of our own tracking that connects directly to various oracles and various smart contracts. And I have to say that tracking this data has become absolutely a necessity for someone like us, because it gives us an ability to pre-anticipate with some forward-looking visibility deteriorations of some liquidity pools, whether it's Curve, Uniswap, or what have you. And we find, especially lately, over the last couple of months, if you're not really doing it in such a deep way, you will just end up holding the bag. So we've seen that these pools are much more brutal because DeFi TVL has shrunk from about 300 billion at the peak to about 75 billion ish right now, depending on where the market is. And as that capital leaves all of us, right, because we're all participants in the DeFi space, it leaves everyone remaining a bit more vulnerable, because the liquidity cushion to absorb large transactions is disappearing to a certain extent, which makes everything very, very sensitive to even relatively minor changes, which just a few months ago would have been absorbed without any pain and without any pressure. ETH, I'm sure most of you would have seen the drama around this pair, which is creating some fundamental pressure for some of the largest lending protocols in the space, because you have an asset which is extremely illiquid versus its outstanding asset base, and yet is highly leveraged, right? So then if you are exposed to that, and if you are not tracking it very carefully, then you can really be exposed and you can really get yourself in trouble. So to everyone out there who is thinking about getting involved in the space or is involved in the space, something like that, I believe, is absolutely vital. It's also not very easy to track the price signals on various chains, right? There is some tooling, obviously, that's out there that allows you to do that. But again, in our case, we had to build our own infrastructure, which sends us alerts. And that allows us to route our transactions across different blockchains, across different protocols. Here you just see, how it looks when you do it with Curve. We've seen numerous stablecoins depeg over the last few weeks. Some of them for a good reason, because they have some credit trouble. Some of them for no real fundamental reason beyond just fear and anxiety. And tools like this will allow you to track basically a pathfinder where you can swap A into B, B into C, bridge it, and do something else with it on some other chain. And it's been pretty interesting because the volatility in the stablecoin space has changed a lot. It went up by the magnitude of 5-10 times, and now having a stablecoin deviate by 1 or 2 percentage points from its peg is very normal, albeit painful. When it comes to liquidations and the potential exposure of the space, again, on-chain data has been extremely valuable to us because you're able to obviously track very large wallets that are exposed to specific movements in the specific prices. And if you actually are able to identify these levels, which what all these large prop shops do anyway, it can also benefit your personal portfolio management, whether you are a DAO, whether you are an individual in the space or a professional investor, doesn't really matter. So we have quite a few DAOs outsourcing their treasury management to us because it's obviously a full-time job. And when you monitor these levels very closely, it helps you with your cash management process quite radically, because first of all, you know how to manage your own risk if you could theoretically be exposed. If you need to manage your treasury and rebalance it between different assets, it obviously makes sense to look at those key levels, especially in terms of market volatility, because you can bet that they will be stress tested, which is what we've seen again time and time again over the last 2 weeks. So my team and myself, we had to stay up basically 24/7 and keep an eye on everything that's bouncing around these key levels, because you just never know. Will liquidation bots do what they're supposed to do on the chain? Will there be bad debt that someone ends up stuck with, whether it's a protocol or a bunch of users or some other market participant? And the good thing is that the tooling is becoming more and more available as the space matures, unless obviously you build something yourself. And it makes it very interesting for us to explore all of that and to manage that risk, as professionally as we can. Beyond that, you need to go even deeper, because that is obviously not enough, and you need to be hedging yourself. What is interesting is that at least prior to this crash, it was pretty easy and pretty comfortable to enjoy very wide spreads between the yields on chain in various liquidity pools versus the cost of hedging on centralized exchanges. And as the markets went into turmoil and the cost of hedging basically exploded, some of these positions became absolutely unmanageable and unprofitable. And what this leads everyone who is providing that liquidity is either stuck in a loss-making position, or they have to very urgently unwind and just get out, further deteriorating the quality of the pool and the situation with the liquidity. And if you don't track this data very, very carefully in an automated way using your own infrastructure, you eventually just end up losing money. It has been phenomenal to see how some of these, costs of funding, which is basically the cost of hedging, jump from reasonable numbers to something completely insane. On some L1 tokens, which again, a lot of people and a lot of treasuries would hold on their balance sheets, the cost of their hedging went up to 100% a year because they were just falling like there is no tomorrow. And it's, speaking from experience, it took us a long time to build that routing system between a decentralized exchange and a centralized exchange where you can manage that risk and balance it all out together. And it's been an interesting exercise. When I tried previously to just do it personally, it was very, very hard without having a proper infrastructure and a proper team. And what we're seeing now is that these numbers are extremely volatile, which again means that if you're not paying extremely close attention, you at the very best will be just, bleeding out or taking some very, very serious hits. Having said all of that, the key complexity and the key risk that anyone in DeFi takes is not a centralized fund blowing up. It's not cost of funding going up or going down, but rather the smart contract risk. And in our journey of being a liquidity provider in the space, we have probably done research on 99% of DeFi projects out there, which requires looking at the code, looking at the, playing with the smart contracts, so on and so forth. And we found that the only way to do this in a responsible manner is to actually have connections to the people writing this code and asking them questions when you're trying to play with the smart contracts and you're stuck and you don't understand if a specific script makes sense or doesn't make sense. So, for example, for us, a very large part of our process is working with those people, whether it's through Discord, Telegram, or what have you. But we find that increasingly, as these projects become more and more complex, because the era of easy, UniV2 forks is played out, fortunately or unfortunately, and as the new generation of DeFi 2.0, 3.0, and whatever, as these new, more complex and more exciting projects come out, you need to really understand the mechanism behind them, whether it's an interest rate swap protocol or a peer-to-peer optimizing protocol or what have you. And anyone who is doing this full-time or not full-time, but should be doing this full-time, we encourage to pay attention to these technical gaps, because the smart contract risk is out of the spotlight right now because we're so preoccupied with things that are blowing up on the credit side and the financial side and the financial risks. But this risk isn't going anywhere, and unfortunately, the wrecked dashboard keeps growing and growing and growing. And it seems that we have a long way to go before these protocols become more robust. Hopefully now in the bear market, which we are unfortunately clearly in, the pace of shipping will probably slow down because there will be less urgency to deploy something very quickly and very urgently, which allows people more time to prepare, analyze, get the second, third, and fourth order if they feel the need to do so. But nonetheless, it remains a very, very important piece of managing your treasury on chain. And leaving the risk piece behind for a second and jumping on to the whole point of providing liquidity in the space from a financial perspective, which is capturing the yield, we have really enjoyed diving very deeply into a variety of different projects and different protocols and different chains and tracking the actual yields. Because what we find is that data that's published on publicly available dashboards or just on those UIs sometimes is a little bit off, sometimes it's completely obsolete, and sometimes just deliberately or mistakenly misleading. The number of times that we, in our initial days, have deployed some capital into some pools only to find out that the yield that we saw on the UI was incorrect, or it was historical and then it died out, and that the liquidity campaign is completely finished, or something else completely changed, and then you have to pull out, unwind, and it's just horrible 25 transactions you have to do to complete all of that. We found that the only way to properly monitor all of that is build, again, our internal tooling where we can track hundreds of signals across hundreds of pools across many different blockchains, which then feed into a wholesome kind of portfolio management, alert, and optimization system. And those who, again, do it, those who pay attention can enjoy some really, really interesting mispricings in the market, because quite often, a specific pool with a specific protocol but on different chains can have very different yields because no one is paying attention. What we've seen now over the last literally few days, which has actually been very encouraging and gave us some confidence that obviously DeFi is not going to go anywhere, but gave us confidence that people are starting to differentiate. We saw that kind of the projects which didn't really bring any new innovation but were just copy paste, their TVL bled out and migrate. Well, some of it obviously just escaped into cash and ran away to cover margin calls or stay on the sidelines. But the high quality projects have remained pretty much untouched from their TVL perspective. So there is real differentiation now where you see real products with real usage and with real TVL, and with real liquidity providers behind them, who over time, throughout this bear market, can hopefully continue to build, continue to grow. And as we come out on the other side, we'll only come out stronger and, and make us as DeFi users and market participants stronger as well. So all of that is a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun when you're playing with DeFi, because eventually and ultimately you're basically using these projects as your full-time job. So we very much enjoy that and encourage everyone to to be active in DeFi as a user rather than just a trader or a speculative market participant. We are always hiring. We always encourage people to come on our podcast and work with us and share their thoughts about the space. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time and for having me. And good luck to us all in this market.
Thank you. This was great. We're going to transition to the next session now.